when we first started Space and Time, we went to all these conferences and we'd ask people, what makes a decentralized application decentralized? Like, there's this term adapt, right? And everyone want to know about building adapt. Well, what makes it decentralized? And they said, well, if it has a token. And I was like, what else? And I was like, that's it. Like, over 90% of the responses was, if it has a token, it's decentralized. And me as a database guy, Scott as a database guy, we just looked at each other and we're like, no, it's that the databases are decentralized, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this kind of concept of there's this notion of decentralized money, which I think everyone loves and gets. But I think the industry is still maturing on this concept of a truly decentralized application and what that means.
Today's guest is Nate Holliday, the co-founder, president, and CEO of Space and Time. Space and Time is a database that's user-friendly AI tools that makes it easier to build applications with its data. It has indexed data on and off-chain for a bunch of blockchains like Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polygon, Avalanche, Sei, Aptos, Sui, and I think I'm missing one, but I named a few there. And essentially, it is supporting the future of AI and blockchains, and Nate could say it way better than I can. So Nate, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jacquelyn. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. We were joking before we came on camera that Space and Time was actually the last guest of my previous podcast that I had. But they won't be the last guest of this one, but I'm excited to have them back. And I spoke with Scott, his other co-founder, last time, but excited to have an update.
Yeah, no, that was first of all, thanks for having us on today, and thanks for having us be the last podcast on the last one you did. We're super appreciative of that.
Forever
and as you
there.
know, Scott is he's a tier 1 presenter. He's a phenomenal technologist. He's an expert in AI, and so hopefully this will match the energy and excitement that this last one as well.
Yes, Nate. For those who do not know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got into the blockchain space to begin with?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm a data nerd, right? I've been in the database and the data business for almost 2 decades now. I started out at Talend, which was a middleware ETL tool, open source project, really cool in the early 2010s, 2011 timeframe. I started then working at a company called Teradata. So Teradata is a large scale enterprise data warehouse. Most of the largest companies in the world run large data warehouses. If you look at Apple, if you look at eBay, if you look at any of the large banks, Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, all of these businesses run enterprise data warehouses to support applications and to support the overall business. And so I worked at Teradata for almost a decade as well. I ran the go-to-market operations. I ran the cloud business, $2 billion P&L. Teradata is a publicly traded company out of San Diego, California. And I really found a lot of joy and excitement out of that. Like, it was at a point in time where people were starting to use data to inform their business. Before that, a lot of business was run off of gut, right? Oh, I've been running this business for 20 years. I don't need your data reports, or I don't need any analytic insights that tell me how to run my business. And so it was really, a really cool time period in business where you're starting to bring more data and insights to businesses to make business decisions. And we knew that data was a critical asset to board of directors, to businesses, to CEOs, to CTOs. And we like to fancy ourselves thinking it's a number 1 asset of a business. Now you look at Google, you look at Facebook, you look at all these large companies, like data is truly it's the number 1 asset a company can have. Yeah. So it was a pretty exciting time. I left Teradata during the COVID era, and I went and worked for a pre-IPO fintech company within the Vista Equity Group. And that's when I first started to get introduced to blockchain technology in general. Before that, in 2016, 17, we heard about, banks tinkering with blockchain technology, but nothing really a substantial kind of use cases were being built at that time. And I got connected with the Chainlink ecosystem and started working with Chainlink as a strategic advisor. And there was a lot of work being done around how do we start to build enterprise applications? How do we start to build enterprise use case? What's our data strategy around where the industry is going in general? And that was really my first entry into the Web3 ecosystem. And it really just kind of blossomed from there. once you get into the Web3 and the blockchain ecosystem, it becomes a whole new world of like new learning, new engagement, new users, like super talented people. I would go around to conferences and meet, developers all over the place. And I just couldn't believe the level of talent at these conferences and with these companies because, previously I was running this multi-billion-dollar business and thousands of employees, and you go to conferences and you would wonder, like, what is the next generation going to look like to take over this business? And a lot of these, legacy technologies, right? They don't have the talent behind them from a young generational perspective to like carry the business forward. And so what drew me into the industry in general was just the talent in the people, like incredibly talented people, a generation that wants to rebuild or reinvent something that is terribly broken when we talk about financial marketplaces, and it just got really exciting for us. So that really spun off what Space and Time is today, and there's a long story of how we built it, but that's kind of how it came to be and how I got into the industry.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You brought up the thing about talent because I've worked in energy markets before, and a lot of the conferences were filled with, older oil barons or people who have been in this space for a very long time. And you don't look at it from that perspective of like, what is the next funnel of talent looking like? But in crypto, we have people of all ages, like even high schoolers, middle schoolers, maybe even building in this space. And then all the way up to, people even in their 70s, I would imagine, 80s. I'm not going to put a limit on age. But to that point, I think there's a lot of interesting things that you said there. And in terms of data, I liked how you talked about the evolution of it, because essentially to me, there was a time where I didn't think about data at all. And now it's like, how can I monetize my data? How can I use my data? Who's using my data, et cetera? And that's such a massive conversation we talk about in crypto very frequently. So how do you look at enterprise data, maybe in the traditional sense, versus like indexing crypto data? And is it different? I would imagine, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, typically, my mental model from a data perspective is there's two different types of databases that rule the world. There's the transactional databases. Oracle's built a whole business on transactional databases. If you're going to go buy something on the internet, if you're going to go do like, really fast transactions, it's running on, what's called an online transactional processing database, an OLTP database, people call it. And really, blockchain is this open source ledger, which is running transactions at a very fast rate of speed. But the cool thing about, of course, blockchain is it's verifiable. And so absolutely, when you think about, the blockchain databases around indexing, is you have all this financial data, all this transactional data between users. That's incredibly important, and it's all open and available for everyone to look at and see, and you can analyze it. And there's a lot of cool things you can do for. Unfortunately, that's about like 1% of the world's data. The other 99% of the world's data is what we call application-specific data, or data that lives in an online analytics database, a Teradata, a Snowflake, a Databricks, much larger volumes of data. And if you want to say like, what did Jacquelyn, what was Jacquelyn's last purchase, you can hit, this blockchain type of a database or a general ledger database and say like, what was the transaction? But if you want to say, how many people like Jacquelyn in this, in New York or in San Francisco between the ages of, X and Y, who, go to San Francisco Giants baseball games, also buy, this type of music, or want to go to this type of a concert, like that's a much more complicated question. Now, if you go to a website like eBay, there's 50,000 different models like this running every day. If you go to Amazon, there's models running like this, asking these questions. Jacquelyn's on our website. What's her purchase history look like? What's her interaction look like? Do we have any cookies for, social engagement? And how do we, figure out how to provide the right experience? And so, for me, from a database perspective, like the enterprise data from an application is very different than transactional data. And blockchain, is a clear winner when it comes to transactional online, processing. It's going to win. You could argue, for a lot of purposes, it's already won. But what hasn't been solved really is this enterprise application data sets. And that's really what Space and Time's working on. Like, how do we bring verifiability into this much larger data set that's much more complicated, but yet powers the smart contract? It powers an AI agent. And the more and more the world goes to autonomous decisioning of a smart contract or an AI agent, or, I just saw, somebody tweet today, right? A drone is autonomous bullets, right? If that's the next thing that's autonomous, you better have a database that's tamper-proof and that can be verified, right? Because all of a sudden things are happening and there's no human intermediaries to try to stop it or fix it. And so we believe that this application specific database that we're working on is yes, it's here to enable smart contracts and blockchain data. But what we're really talking about as well is just a tamper-proof or verifiable database, for the world to operate in any type of autonomous decision-making across any vertical.
Yeah, that's huge. How do you kind of pitch that or explain that to companies outside of the crypto industry? Because this makes sense to me, but maybe for those who are working in traditional data or even just businesses that use data day in and day out, they might not actually understand the value of what you're saying.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, right? Because it's a challenge, and this is why it's going to be a decade evolution for us. A lot of companies look at it and say, "But I have people, I trust them.
I have people,
I have my people."
Yeah.
Or they say, "I have a really good security team, and I have really good audit logs, and we have checks and balances of process management." Obviously, we take for granted in Web3 and the blockchain industry, like this kind of trustless or zero trust capability, right? There's this notion of like, if there's anything that is requires trust in the middle, we want it out. For some businesses, this is a feature that they like. I'll give you an example. Talking to a really, really large ticketing company. And, it's a very easy pitch. And everyone hears the blockchain ticketing, example. It's all over the web, right? Which is basically like, if you go to a concert, you can basically, buy your ticket and you can scan your ticket and you can't duplicate that ticket and it saves it from secondary markets and scalpers. And there's all these things that the blockchain solves for the user of it. Well, in talking to this very, very large ticketing company, they looked at me and I said, not only does it solve the consumer experience and the issues around, resale and fraud, et cetera, but it also solves your vendor solution. Right? Because if I'm your vendor selling shirts or I'm your vendor selling drinks at the concert, why do I have to wait 30 days for you to pay me? Like, I brought all my material there. I filled up all the cups. I gave them to all the people. Like, why am I waiting 30, 60, 90 days for you to pay me? Blockchain makes instantaneous payments available to all vendors. And they looked at me and they said, well, but we like that float. Right?
Who
and
likes
it's interesting,
that?
right?
Who likes not being paid instantly?
The company likes it because they get to hold the cash and they get to put that cash to work from an interest perspective. And they don't have to pay their vendors because they get to hold their cash, right? And so from a business perspective, they build these into their financial models to become more profitable.
Okay.
Now, as a vendor, you're like, time out, I want to get paid now.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I think you're starting to see use cases where employees are like, why am I waiting like 2 weeks to get paid?
Yeah.
Like, I worked this second, I worked this minute. Like, why am I not being streamed, payments into my bank account at least every hour, if not every 10 seconds or 10 minutes, right? And I think obviously the clear answer to that is, well, it's too expensive in Web 2. Right? There's a payroll process and there's all these people at work and you've got to go and, divvy out all this money. In a blockchain process, it's actually not. It's individual transfers of payments, and it can be done very fast at basically no cost. So I think there's a lot of use cases where in Web 2 it's going to take them longer to get there, right? Because they want to be able to go and manipulate the database from time to time. They want to be able to hold on to cash and have an interest on that and hold their vendors at bay. So I think it's going to be a longer process, but I think ultimately, verifiable compute wins because the world's going to demand it. It's also a security function that all businesses require. I'll give you just one more example. Every publicly traded company today sends out these little DocuSigns that say, hey, if you're an executive or you know something, you got to sign this thing that says like you're not manipulating the data, you haven't cooked the books, you haven't done anything nefarious for the earnings call that's coming up, and it happens every quarter. It's like, okay, cool. Like that process probably isn't going away because there's a liability concern there. But how about just making, your CRM and your pipeline and your financials built on a database where you actually can't go in and change things. You actually can't go update the forecast in a certain way, right? Where now you're starting to manipulate this in a way that maybe is beneficial for, certain people within the company, or maybe a lot of people in the company. But to me, it's also a security feature that is going to solve a lot of problems.
Do you think a lot of the data today is being manipulated by maybe traditional data warehouses?
I think that people like the ability to do that. I think, one of the things that you see in the press all the time is, oh, this report came out from this organization. And then a couple months later, like, oh, we fixed that report, right? We actually didn't add as many jobs as we said we did.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting, right? Because I think what you're seeing is just this, citizens are just waking up to the fact that they're being manipulated, and they're being manipulated across a lot of different spectrums of their life. But I think people just assume that, whether they're using a social media platform or they're interacting with the government or they're doing X, Y, and Z, I think people just assume my data is being manipulated for whatever gain it is for that organization. Yeah. And it just kind of is what it is. So I think, there's a lot of times where people assume it and people see it, but people don't necessarily know how to fix it, right? Because it's a big problem to fix. And to your point, when we first came out with this in 2022, we would meet with some organizations that are no longer in the crypto space. And it was interesting because they would be like, oh, we don't need to meet. Oh, interesting. We don't need to talk. And we would point out specific things like this would help with this.
Yeah.
They say, we don't need that help. Well, now all of a sudden, right, they're no longer here.
Yeah.
And
they could have used
it starts to make sense.
Right.
Yeah. And so a lot of times when we have these conversations, kind of like a radar goes up and says some people, the eye-opening experience for me is some people actually don't want the help on purpose, right? Yeah. And you don't find out for years later as to why. But I do think obviously data is being manipulated for organizations to serve whatever their interests are. Not all organizations, and I don't think it's top-down driven from organizations. Right. But the fact is, if you're running a database in a centralized cloud environment today, you have a lot of people that can get to that. You have the cloud provider that can get to it. You have the database software provider that can get to it. Right. You have all the employees in the company that can get to it. If you hack into the network, any hacker can get to it. Any consultant from the outside that has access can get to it. So as an executive of a company, although, you have the right business processes in place and security in place, there's just a lot of people that can get to it, right? If you're running a really large bank, you have 150,000 employees, et cetera. There's a lot of people that could wake up someday and say, you know what? Today might be a day where I decide that, I want to do something different that might not be in the best interest of the company.
Yeah.
One of the biggest use cases we see right now that we're trying to solve is just SIM swaps. Right? You walk into any, telco, retail establishment, you pay someone $700, ask them to SIM swap a number, right? Drain a bank account and off you go. And a lot of times it works. So there's hundreds of use cases as to why a tamper-proof or verifiable database matters.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And even when I think about data from my own personal life, it's oftentimes, and I'm sure you've seen tweets about this or people complain about this, it's if I start talking about something, either in my own house or with friends, or if I search something once, suddenly every single ad I get is for that exact thing. And it's actually crazy because it's sometimes like for things that I wasn't even asking for. It was just like maybe my friend was telling me how she was going to go to like some restaurant this weekend, and all of a sudden I'm getting all these recommendations for that exact thing. And I'm like, it's not even for me. You know what I mean? So like that's a form of data that I think a lot of people understand, right? And they complain about where's the privacy, et cetera, or even like, you know, if it's free, like you're the user or you're the product, right? That's what they say. So what are other forms of data that you think are important for the listeners to understand and maybe keep an eye out for too, that maybe you guys are trying to solve for?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great use case that you talked about. I think a lot of times people, they walk into a hotel room. I was just in a hotel room and they had an Amazon, you know, Alexa or Echo, and I just went and hit mute, right? It's just like,
my mom unplugs her Alexa and I'm like, you're crazy, but I'm also like, but you're not wrong.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I like to go out and like hike different mountain ranges and see different things. And, you know, Dolomites is top on my list right now. And so like every time I log into social app, there's just like
hiking boots.
There's some Dolomite ad around like, you know, hike this trail and stay at these hotels and and do all these things. So, you know, it's interesting. I think the use cases that we're most focused on are the really boring, scalable use cases. Like, you know, talk about index blockchain data.
What does that really mean? Like indexing blockchain data.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So if you want to go build like different types of DeFi protocols, and or if you want to just have a better DeFi experience within a protocol, or let's say a lending is a perfect example, right? Everyone's talking about, you know, lending, right? So I'm doing all these transactions on chain. I have a few wallets. I'm paying off, you know, different types of loans. You know, and I'm paying, you know, I'm doing different things on Ethereum than Solana, than Avalanche, and et cetera. Me as a user, right? I'm building this kind of blockchain score. I'm building this score across, you know, blockchain protocols. Maybe I should get better rates. Maybe I should be more trusted. If you're actually a lender, who do you trust and who do you get rates to? And have they actually paid off, you know, certain loans? Smart contracts today can't answer these simple questions. And the reason nobody gets this type of banking treatment within Web3 is because it's been really, really hard to build without this verifiable database to be able to bring in data from all the different chains and ask these complex questions, right? Like who's paid off loans? How much have they paid off across which chains? And so a lot of it isn't because the industry is nascent and we haven't learned how to do this. Most people know how to do this. The challenge is more of a technology challenge. Is you just can't ask a simple smart contract those types of questions. And so, you know, indexing data basically means taking the Ethereum blockchain or taking, you know, Avalanche or Sei or Aptos or whoever, and bringing that data into a relational data store or, you know, a table into space and time. So you can ask questions like, show me data from the Sei table with data from the Avalanche table or data from the Aptos table or ZK Syncs table or Polygon. And so you can start to like ask different questions about different things that is happening. Another use case that people care about probably is just gaming in general. Like everyone inherently knows, like if you're playing a Web2 game and you have your Robux or you're playing your Fortnite, like you win all these rewards and you have all these tokens. Like you can't really port that to something else, right? And you can't really go necessarily sell them in an open marketplace. And so there's this inherent realization that Web3 gaming is going to take shape because people just want to own their assets that they earn and that they spend a lot of time in.
Yeah. We've had some guests to talk about that in the past. Sorry, you were going.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And so the question is, though, I worked really hard to earn this reward. I'm going to get an airdrop based on this reward. But how do I really know that the engineer didn't drop it to his 10 friends as well?
Yeah.
Or like her 5 friends, right? Like you don't, like how rare is it and how many people really did earn it? Well, if an engineer can go artificially create an account that shows that they achieved X level so they're in part of the airdrop, like, is that fair? And if it's not fair, how would you even know if it's fair? Like as a gamer, you can go maybe check on like, you know, who's reaching certain levels, etc. But how do you know was actually played and earned and not input from a back end user? And so there's a lot of simple use cases that, you know, we think and inherently know are fair or should be done. But it's just the technology behind the scenes hasn't. If you're not indexing the data and you're not running the models within a database and you don't have tamper-proof tables, like there's no way to ensure that an engineer is not manipulating the data back so their 10 friends can also have this really rare NFT that they're delivering for a game. So I think there's a ton of these use cases that we could talk for hours on, which is simply, we want transparency on a blockchain, but everyone's asking, where are all the applications? Well, they're coming, but the next question everyone's going to have is, how are these applications fair and transparent and verifiable? Mm-hmm. That's why space and time exists.
Yes, there we go. That's the pitch. That wasn't hard.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I understand it. And I think I see a lot of value in it. And something I was going to ask you beforehand is in regards to all the chains you work with, like, did you guys decide to work with them or they came to you? How does that relationship work?
Yeah, some of them we've gone to and some have come to us. Mm-hmm. So we have, over 10,000 developers developing on the Space and Time platform. And we do a lot of market surveys, right? Like, what applications do you want to build on and which chains? And then there's a lot of, blockchains that come to us and say, look, we don't have a lot of applications being built on us. And, we realize like just providing a blockchain service isn't enough, because what happens is in a Web 2 world, if you want to build an application, you go into AWS, you spin it up, and then you have all these choices. What type of transactional database do I want? And what type of analytic database do I want? And what's the ETL that I need? And where am I going to store my data? And how am I going to build this out? In Web3 world, they go and they get a grant from an ecosystem that says, here's some money to go build an application on our platform. And they say, wonderful. And they take that grant and then they go to AWS and they launch a thing. And then they start to build this all out. And it's not integrated to the actual blockchain, right? That AWS hasn't indexed that data in a relational data store into the AWS marketplace to consume the data, to be able to feed the data back to the blockchain. So you have this interconnectivity issue where the blockchain data doesn't connect to a database and a data platform ecosystem. And even if it did, which most of them do today, right? So the teams, they go out and they build this interconnectivity. But the problem is they sit there and they say, well, you can't really ever send data back to a smart contract based on your analytics because you can't trust what's been delivered, right? You can't trust what's been built because that everything that you built in AWS now is tamperable. You can manipulate it. Now, a lot of times people just throw their hands up and they're like, well, we'll get to that later. We don't care. We've already spent $1 million building it. But ultimately, like, we just believe like this is the world's moving to. When we first started Space and Time, we went to all these conferences and we'd ask people, what makes a decentralized application decentralized? Like, there's this term, a dApp, right? And everyone want to know about building a dApp. Well, what makes it decentralized? And they said, well, if it has a token. And I was like, what else? And I was like, that's it. Like, over 90% of the responses was, if it has a token, it's decentralized. And me as a database guy, Scott as a database guy, we just looked at each other and we're like, no, it's that the databases are decentralized, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this kind of concept of there's this notion of decentralized money, which I think everyone loves and gets. But I think the industry is still maturing on this concept of a truly decentralized application and what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Space and Time helps people build dApps or apps with the AI tools that you guys have, right? So what are some of the ones that you are seeing built right now, and like with what types of data? What's kind of like catching your interest? Maybe if in your free time you get to look at some of these apps, which I'm not sure you get that much free time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think
I get it.
Well, I mean, ultimately building better dApps and making smarter is the purpose of why we're here. So we actually spend a good amount of time trying to focus on how do we actually improve dApp development, and how do we actually improve the logic around smart contract development. I think there's a couple of really interesting ones that are being built right now. There's a lot of things around the financial markets. So there's a lot of DeFi protocols that are looking at, for example, cross-chain, so derivatives. Mm-hmm. There's the lending protocols, which is a slam dunk for us, and there's a couple of them that have already come out. Lendvest, Credor, and others that have already come out and said we're providing a more sophisticated lending protocol to the world. Um, there's also, there's a lot of business around today, restaking. We hear restaking all the time in the industry. Without a ZK coprocessor like space and time to process what's happening, like how do you actually do slashing? Right? It becomes a really interesting concept to okay, everyone understands this whole restaking ecosystem, but yet there's no inherent way to do slashing in a trustless way. So you have to be able to provide tools like space and time ZK coprocessor to be able to automate this slashing process. There's also a lot of work being done around DPIN. And so there's things that we continue to push on. And to your point, AI enables faster application development, but if you don't have the underlying data, faster application development is just more of the same. And so we're really starting to focus on yes, we're enabling faster development with our AI tools that we, build in partnership with Microsoft. But we're still vast majority of our focus is getting the data layer right for interoperability between off-chain database computation and blockchain services.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of different people, both on the show and during my reporter days about AI, X blockchain, collaborations there. I think there's a lot of hype there, and there's also a lot of truth and need for it, right? And I see you're kind of looking at me okay, what's she going to ask next? But where do you actually see the most value and opportunity between the two? Is it through data avenues or something else? And what role do you really want space and time to play there? Because in the intro I mentioned there's this AI and blockchain, part to this, but then there's also so much more going on in space and time. But I feel like that also helps, run things. I'm asking a few questions here. First question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first question. Microsoft led one of our largest rounds that you covered at TechCrunch.
I sure did. Yes, I do remember that.
And I remember I thought, my goodness, this is getting covered in TechCrunch. It was a great day. I still remember that conversation. Microsoft invested into space and time for two reasons. One is solve the interoperability between off-chain databases in Web 2 and Web 3. And number two, right, if AI is going to take over the world, verifiable compute matters. Now, this was May of 22, June of 22-ish. This was well before the whole Chat GPT craze in November, December.
Yeah.
Right. This was we launched an NVIDIA partnership on GPU accelerated compute that summer as well. In support of what we're building with Microsoft. We lean into AI because it accelerates application development, like what I talked about. I'll give you a couple examples of what we do right now. If you want to ask a question, right, show me the last 10 transactions, for Sui. You can write a SQL statement, or you could just type it in. When you type in the question in natural language, it generates a SQL statement for you. So now a normal person that doesn't know SQL can ask this question and get a response. It'll actually start to build the graph too. So not only do you know who the top 10 are, right, it starts to show you in visual representation of who they are. Really cool. Our developers now internally are using a product that we call Autocoder, which is basically when we develop code, we can run Autocoder, which will basically review the code and update it, right, if we think that there's anything that should be in question. So now we have faster development of products that we've never had before. We also have the ability, to start generating applications on their own. So, one of the things that we're going to come out with, in a couple months is an acceleration of application development. Because, if you think in the future world, all of my kids, they want to be influencers, right? They want to be a YouTube star. They watch all these, things that are happening. And it's super interesting, right? Because I sit there as a parent, and as a parent, as a parent, I'm looking and saying, how can I help my kids in the future world? And I look at this and I say, well, when I was a kid, right, how, there were sales jobs that could help you be successful. There's, go learn engineering and start to code, which can help you be successful.
There's influencer
knowing what
camps.
I know about AI. There's influencer camps, right? But knowing what I know about AI now, right, you're still going to have engineers and coders, but the capabilities of AI are going to, quickly grow. And so as the next generation comes along, right, it's going to be much more important around like the community that they build in the ecosystem that they build than like what their actual skill set is and like, for example, developing, and generating code.
Yeah.
And so, we're thinking about like, yes, like AI is important in this world because it is going to start to consume all these resources and it's going to start to change like what people work on and what people focus on a daily basis. But there's a lot of people working on, AI app generators and AI to SQL language and AI to visual graphics or dashboarding. So we do that to demonstrate, how to build better, faster, cheaper, more advanced applications. But the only reason we do it is because, ultimately that AI needs a verifiable database. And so we still, right, sit at this base layer of verifiability, which powers AI applications. If and when, it's not a matter of if, it's actually when, AI agents start transacting on everyone's behalf, like that has to be a verifiable process. It can't just be like, well, we have a bunch of people in the back room working on things that we trust.
Yeah.
And so, we're super bullish on AI because it requires a verifiable database. And sometimes we think in verticals. So there's blockchain and smart contracts. There's AI agents and AI. And then, if we want to, go on a fun tangent, there's the now autonomous bullet drones, right? But really,
those, yeah.
AI is interesting because it now it'll cross every vertical in every industry. So it's just something like, obviously we're heavily leaning into, but we are the boring database that powers it, right? Like most applications, if you're playing Fortnite, like you have no idea what database that's running on. If you're playing World of Warcraft, you have no idea that that's running on a Teradata database. Like people just, they don't know and they don't actually care, nor should they really care, right? They just want to play a fun game.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with you on all of that. And I feel like you slightly touched on like what the future can look like. And that was another question I was going to ask you is like right now, we discussed 2022, the Microsoft relationship, space and time today, but then where do you see the company going in the future as well as like the category as a whole?
Yeah. So in the future, we think like AI and blockchain continue to merge together. We think that we will be powering a world in the very near future where, any kid in the world can pick up space and time. They can develop an application, call it a dog walking app. They can deploy it to their community, and they can tokenize it, right? They can go out and they can, enable, the community to interact. So if I want to create my dog walking app for my community, right, and I'm walking your dog and I want you to pay me, you could pay me in ETH, you could pay me in BTC, you could pay me in maybe, Nate's, dog walking app coin, right?
You got a dog walking app coin?
Yeah, I don't, but maybe somebody will create it, right?
Yes.
But there's this notion of like, if I'm going to win in the AI economy as a next generation, like, how am I going to do that if AI can write better code than me, if AI can be more creative on movie scripts than me,
right?
If AI can, there's this world that we're painting for the next generation, which is like, hey, like, welcome to the world, but yet AI is going to be able to do all this stuff for you. And so if you're sitting there, it's like, what is my place and where do I fit in this world? And to me, it's going to be really community. Like everyone looks at this like meme craze and they're like, oh, these memes are crazy.
Don't get me started.
Solana is centralized and blah, blah, blah. But you don't realize like this is community to these people, right? This is a sense of belonging. This is an identity. This is I don't think like people really caught on to like how powerful this meme thing is because yes, in some sense, like they're creating this thing out of thin air, but in another sense, they're giving their network, they're giving their community a sense of identity. They're giving them a sense of religion, right? Of you belong here. We're going to win together, and it's kind of us against the world, and it's a powerful thing, right? And so we don't discredit that at all, and we're here to help really feel this sense of how to develop applications, community, and how to tokenize that to win in the AI economy.
I also think it's like AI will just continue to help people in terms of their job, their personal lives, anything and everything. But it's not, I think it could replace things, but it should enhance it more than anything. Like I should still be able to do my job with the help of AI, but I shouldn't just go sit on a beach for the rest of my life unless I've made enough money then. But whatever, that's beside the point. But for the
what
average
beach would
person,
it be? What beach would it be, Jacquelyn?
That's a good question. Which beach? I really like St. Martin. One of those beaches.
Never been.
Yeah, you gotta go.
Never been.
Sorry.
I have to go.
You got me. You caught me off guard. There we go. There is my honest answer.
That's for a podcast.
Yeah.
But to your point though, one of my kids, he loves movies. Just loves movies. Every movie comes out, Dad, new movie, we gotta go. And so I prioritize this because I know he loves them. Well, he also likes to create his own movies, right? And so he'll create his own screenplay. He'll do his own script, and then he'll act it out. Right, Dad, like my movie's coming out, like I'm going to act it out for you. And it's a full 90-minute movie. It's, when I commit, I got to commit. Like this is not a 10-minute thing. This is a full movie. He works with GPT now, right? To come up with different character dynamics, to come up with theme songs, to come up with all this stuff.
This is a perfect example.
This is a perfect example right now. As a father, my kid would rather play with ChatGPT and build his, movie scripts more than go play some video game or go play basketball outside. Like this is his thing. But as a father, how cool would that be if I could just pay $50 and have that movie come to life for him? Right. And as he watches it, all of a sudden, oh, I don't like that character. I don't like that. That works. So Dad pays another $50 to render the updated movie. Now, Dad would much rather pay a couple $100, right, for him to be creative and create something that he's super proud of, rather than like go spend another $200 to like go back to Disneyland for the 100th time.
Yeah.
Right. And but what does that happen? So now there's this ecosystem where my son has this movie application where he can create a movie script and it creates a short video. And Dad's paying for the rendering of it. But also, like, he has subscribers now, and people are watching this, and they find it funny. And I tell you, like, what my kids find funny, I don't necessarily like understand, but all their friends find it funny.
Skibbity Ohio.
And so now and you look at it as like, so what happens to Netflix when you have creators making stuff? And not only is it more funny than what's being created at Netflix, the people creating it is people that they know, love, and go to school with every day. Right. And so all of a sudden, the biggest movie producers are no longer some Hollywood person or some Hollywood organization. It's Jacquelyn and her 10 friends that are creating this really cool movie, and they get together on Saturday nights and they create these movies, and then they put them out to their community and tokenize them. So I just think like, it's much bigger than we think. And to your point, like the interaction on a daily basis with this becomes something really cool.
Yeah. And in a sense, there's a lot more originality and like community driven aspect to it, especially to the point about your son's movies and making things related to something that you care about. Like how many hours would it take him to do this if he didn't have the tool, Yeah,
well, it really is impossible, right? Because how do I bring that movie to life for him? I can't, right? I would have to go get a
They would cost you more than $50, I think,
music producers. And I mean, at a certain point, it's like, it becomes impossible to have. And to your point, it becomes a lot more money.
Yeah. And that's the future.
So overall, we're super bullish on AI in general. And, ultimately, what does space and time look like in that? If we strike it right and the app generation is a part of that, then that's a monolithic win for us, and a huge avalanche of that just snowballs into more and more.
Yeah.
But even if not, right, we still believe that every database in the next decade will be powered by a verifiable compute, right? In database, zero knowledge proofs that are being generated, and we think we're well ahead of the market on where that is, and we can do it at scale, and we can do it very, very fast, and we can do it relatively cheap.
Yeah, there we go, Nate. Last thing, I'd like to know if you could leave us with a piece of advice, something that you've carried with you throughout your time in this industry.
Ooh. So I've been in different types of executive roles for a long time with the largest companies in the world. Um, I think one of the interesting things in life is you just think people haven't figured out, right? Like this older generation hasn't figured out. They're so smart. And there's two things I carry with me, and I've carried with me for a long time. One is uh, this bias for action. Like, get out and do things. Just try. Like, nobody knows how things are going to end in the day, the week, the month, the year. But you got to get out there and you got to try. To your point, like, even if AI continues to evolve, like, sitting on a beach somewhere, although it might be interesting for a week, like, just get out there and do something, right? Mm-hmm. And when it doesn't work, like, that's a learning input. And then the other one is really always stay curious. Like, a lot of people are like, I get a lot of the older generation comes up and says, like, why are you doing this? Like, Nate, you've had a very successful Web2 career. You're learning this new thing. There's all these bad actors. There's reputational risk to you. Like, why are you doing this? Like, you don't need to be doing this. And, I always come back to this notion of, like, I do believe that, like, Web3 and blockchain is the future of computation, and, like, verifiable compute is the future. And, like, I still have a long life to live, hopefully. So, like, if I believe this is the future, then I have to learn it. Then I have to engage in it. Then I have to, go wear my soul's out at conferences and meeting with people and learning and educating myself and looking stupid sometimes because, a 24-year-old knows something that I don't know. But, like, that's perfectly fine with me. Like, I'm fine, like, learning stuff from everybody. And I think that the third one is just, like, this notion of, like, everyone has it figured out, or, like, you can't look stupid. Like, at the end of the day, like, you can learn something from everybody. So, like, in your bias for action, and you're out there doing stuff, like, have the humility just to learn and ask questions, and don't be afraid to, like, be the dumbest person in the room to learn something new. So that's what I would say. I would say that, this generation that's building Web3 is awesome. They're going to be wildly successful, and they're going to get to rebuild the whole financial market from the ground up, which is a really unique and exciting opportunity for us, for everyone in Web3, whether you're young or old.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all of that, and I loved everything that we talked about today. Nate, thank you for coming on. We should do it again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
absolutely, anytime. Thanks so much, Jacquelyn.
Thanks.